Now I'm going to do the discount cash flow approach again with one minor adjustment, an alternate way of doing it. Everything is going to be the same in terms of projecting the cash flow from the company and also for the discount rate. The only difference is going to be how we calculate the terminal value. And there is a commonly used approach. We usually, and the last time we just did it as a perpetuity, which was a simple assumption. But that may not always be the case. A business may only have 10, 20 more years left. And the way to incorporate that is using something called an terminal multiple, where the multiple terminal value is calculated by a multiple at that time. Okay, so if you had the EBITDA in year 5 is going to be 150 million, and let's assume we take an EBITDA multiple of 5 times. Okay, so then you basically would multiply your cash flow during that year by 5 times, and that would give you the projected value of the company as a terminal value at that time. Now it is a situation where you're taking an estimate, but it's basically based on a traded multiple of existing companies in the same industry. Okay. Now the majority of this is still using a discounted cash flow. So that is one of the pros of this approach. And the second one is the terminal value is actually based on real life trading values that somebody is paying for. So it's a comparable. It's used based on the company's existing EBITDA multiples. So it's what I guess investors are valuing it at. So there's some credence to that. There's some objectivity. Now let's look at some of the cons associated with this approach. The first one is very similar to the last one. It's based on the fact that the terminal value is such a large portion of the value. You're looking at it and you're going to say that the majority of the value here is being calculated by the EBITDA, which is being calculated by the EBITDA multiple. Okay, so essentially you could even argue that this is a multiples approach and not a DCF approach, because if 90% of the value is EBITDA, or the terminal value, then the EBITDA multiple is going to create the value of the company rather than the cash flow, at least the majority of it. And as a result, changing the multiple, even by a slight amount, if I change it from 5 to 6, it'll have a big impact on the complete value of the company. So essentially, the level of accuracy is lower. You'd have to do it as a range, and it's not giving you the amount of it's not giving you the amount of accuracy that you would expect out of going through all that extra work to do a discounted cash flow, when you could have just done it using a multiples approach and come with something very similar. So then the question is, we've gone through the approaches. How do you value a company? How should you? There's multiple approaches. Which one is the best? The answer is there really is no best one. It's usually, in real life, it's a combination of all of the approaches that are done. The discounted cash flow is an important one, but you do all of them, and multiples, DCF, and you can do the DCF with both types of terminal values, with a multiple or with a perpetuity. And then you create some ranges, and the ranges are really based on changing some of the variables in your assumption. Expect investor return, cash flow projections, things like that. So you're never really going to come up with a situation where you say the company's worth $1.38 billion. You usually will come up with a situation where you say it's worth somewhere between 1.2 to 1.5 billion. So it's more of an art than a science when you do it that way, but it will give you a range, and it should be relatively narrow once you've done all of these different approaches, if it's a mature company and you can't predict these variables.